Governor Scott Walker suspending his campaign. That's the technical term, but he's essentially dropping out of this race. Not only that, he is encouraging other candidates to do the same. And like we saw with Governor Rick Perry from Texas, he also said there are too many personal attacks, not enough focus on what the GOP should be pushing for, which is positive solutions. Let's bring in our panel a little early, an expanded panel. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill, Nina Easton, columnist for Fortune magazine, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Brit, someone who knows Scott Walker well, told me that rather than run on who he is, he ran as who he thought voters wanted him to be, particularly in Iowa. And that was his demise. He could never get traction, even from the start.
May well be the case, Bret. You know, this is a political cycle in which a lot of Republican voters are saying that they want their leaders to fight. You particularly hear it about the congressional leadership in Washington, that they don't fight. Well, here was a governor who really had fought in some tremendously bruising battles with the public employee unions in Wisconsin and prevailed several times. And yet that image of a real fighter was not the character that we saw on the stump, and particularly not the character we saw in the debates. And the man in the debate seemed retiring. He seemed not to have a lot to say. He didn't use his full time, particularly in the first debate. In the second debate, he didn't get called on very much. And when he did, he didn't make any kind of a splash. He needed to raise his game, not change his game, raise his game, I think. And he failed to do it, and the results are what you see.
Juan, it is striking, these poll numbers. The last time he was leading in Iowa, was in July. An NBC Marist poll had him leading the pack in Iowa. Then you have the CNN ORC poll that comes out, and he is less than 1% as of yesterday.
It's unbelievable. In some sense, remember, Iowa's a neighboring state. He had a reputation there. He thought that this was going to open alternatives for him, avenues for him, I should say, that weren't available to other candidates. And with Iowa, he would have momentum then and go on to New Hampshire. But what you've seen is a slippage that I think is tied into a couple of things. One is he's not an outsider, and this is the season of the outsider. Secondly, I don't think that he demonstrated that he could move beyond the union issue. Brit's exactly right. That was the reason for the candidacy, but then he had to demonstrate that he was more than it, that he had some national appeal, and he never could get traction on that front. So I think in the short run, if you're Governor Kasich of Ohio, in the short run, I think if you are one of the insiders as opposed to outsiders, you may have something to gain from his departure.
Well, in fact, already the co-chair, Walker co-chair in New Hampshire, has signed on to the Rubio campaign.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see at least some shift there.
I think both of you are right on why he couldn't get traction, but here's the thing, a lot of this was about money. And that's the precipitous reason for why he dropped out, is my understanding. He was broke, and his donors were going elsewhere, as you just indicated. This was a guy who didn't have the resources to stay in it, because there's a lot of candidates who are still in it, who are still insiders, who aren't getting traction, but but have the bank account to stay in, the longevity. And so it shows you the importance in a race like this of having those resources.
Striking how he phrased it, though, Charles. Helping to clear the field is my patriotic duty.
Well, I mean, it was a remarkable statement. You rarely hear that. Candidate who bows out, it was my calling. Essentially, I'll give a translation here, to get out of the race, to consolidate the anti-Trump forces. I mean, that's what he was saying. He refers to the front runner. We all know who that is. But I find it interesting, he didn't blame Trump for him dropping out. I think he kind of knows why, and it alludes to what you said. He peaked early, and it's not just a process event. When he peaked early, he was way out ahead from that one great speech he made in Iowa. He then played safe. And when he got a difficult issue like subsidies for biofuels in Iowa, he fudged. He was able, I'm not going to talk about certain issues. He was sitting on a lead, which was a very early lead in one state, and it all hinged on Iowa. He knew, and he said that if he didn't win Iowa, he'd have to reconsider. When he knew that he disappeared in Iowa, it was over. But I think in a way, it's kind of patriotic. He thought, if I get out, well, he's dead broke anyway, like the Clintons after their time at the White House. But he realized if he gets out, it may the beginning of the winnowing of the field. Started early because it's going to happen eventually. Do it now.
But, you know, we're talking early, but this is, I want to put up that poll, NBC Marist poll. That's July. I mean, Brit, it's mid-September. I saw people on Twitter saying that he is the Tim Pawlenty of this cycle.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable comparison. Pawlenty looked like a pretty hot ticket there for a while in the last time around, and he faded very quickly and pretty early, and he was out of the race. And obviously, Nina's right about the proximate cause being, you know, running out of money. That's true of nearly all candidates who drop out of races. They lose support. When they lose support, they lose money, and then they can't afford to campaign anymore, and they've already may be in a little debt. And, you know, your creditors and suppliers are beginning to wonder, and unless you want to pile up more debt, you got to get out. So he did. It was interesting that in his comments he mentioned only trying to overtake the front runner in the Republican ranks. He never mentioned the incumbent president or the Democratic Party members that are trying to succeed him, which shows you sort of where we are now in all this. And I think it's a testament to the strange atmosphere in which we're operating. The two very successful, quite conservative governors are now off the, you know, in a year when it was early thought that you wanted to be a governor to win. Now it turns out you don't want to be an office holder at all, at least based on current poll results. And this is a year in which qualifications are disqualifying. Very unusual.
Very. Panel, thank you.